Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest edition of ToDebate.net. I am Sebastian, one of your co-hosts, and the other co-host is right here in front of me, at least over video conference, and that's Dirk. How are you today?
I'm ready for having this debate with you. How are you?
I wonder when you will say you're not ready. This is our 20th recording. Let's see if it also makes it to our published episodes.
What you're telling me is I'm saying the same thing over and over again. I have to have a different catchphrase.
I don't know. I guess it's fine if you're always ready. I don't. Okay, well, and the motion is governments should be allowed to collect private data. And with a flip of the coin, you will be against, whereas I will be in favor of the motion, which is not necessarily representative of my personal thinking, but this is the side that I was assigned to. So whenever you're ready, you will have your 2 minutes to expose your first series of arguments.
Okay, let's do this. Dirk goes first and argues against the motion.
Do you remember our fourth debate, the one on limits of freedom of speech? Back then, you, Sebastian, argued that we should have no limits. Today, we argue a very related subject, because having no privacy means having no freedom. This may sound too heavy, but it's really hard to overstate this. Every oppressive regime in history tried to spy on its people. Why? Because it is a tool to control us. A free society is a society that allows you to move, think, and talk freely. And studies showed that people behave differently if they assume to be watched. Handing over your private data is nothing else but allowing governments to watch you permanently and judge your behavior. That may be fine if you trust your current government, but what happens once things change? And I believe we've seen a couple of occasions recently where things suddenly changed. Sometimes people say that this is a small price to pay for security, but I'll have an easy time showing, and I will do that in the second part of our debate, that our private data doesn't increase security. And for the price, well, our great-grandfathers rather died to win our freedom. In other parts of the world, people die right now to protect freedom. How much more expensive can it get? Therefore, yes, I'm against allowing governments to collect private data.
Now it's Sebastian's turn. Let's hear his argument.
I am not going to use the argument that a good citizen has nothing to hide. Indeed, I would agree that there is always a risk of misinterpretation of the data. However, I do suggest that we should allow governments to collect data, and we can define what kind of data that is to help, among other things, prevent attacks. Now, you may be correct that up to now, we have not been able to maybe detect that many attacks. I actually don't know, and this is a problem. The secrecy surrounding the ability to know whether data has been used to counter attacks. But I do believe that with a use of that data over time in the future, we will be able to derive insights, learnings, patterns from all that data being collected. We just don't know how to use it properly. Now, there's another aspect. We often talk about personal data as if, indeed, as you're saying, that the governments would be spying on your citizens. But there's also another benefit, and I think in general, the safety isn't a benefit of the citizens, but another benefit, if you look at, for instance, health data, medical records, do you want to have these medical records being read by private companies whose motivation is money, or by governments, by the Minister of Health, for instance, which can help with research? So let's not confine private personal data to only, let's say, your name, your habits, but also things which may have direct consequences on how we can improve the health of our citizens. And one final point for this initial speech, checks and balances. As in most democracies, and I want to insist that we're talking about democracies in this case, you have checks and balances. If you look currently, we're recording this in February, currently in the US, with what Trump is trying to do with his direct executive orders, the justice system actually manages to step in and say, no, hang on, this is not legal, or maybe not legal. You can do the same with recording and collecting data. You can have checks and balances. So overall, It is not about the fact that there's nothing to hide, but it is in the interest of the citizens to be able to collect, for the governments to collect that data.
Next up, Dirk. Let's hear his rebuttal.
You misunderstood, Sebastian. I wasn't saying that we are not collecting the data or didn't know enough to prevent attacks. I was saying that we didn't need any additional information to prevent attacks. In case of the 9/11 attacks, the official institutions were not lacking the knowledge. They were not exchanging it properly. The same is true in the most recent attacks. Even in Berlin, the case where that attack on that Christmas market happened, the guy driving the truck was someone known. So proper police work would have prevented that. Not more data, not private data would have increased security. Basically, police work would have increased security. And that's an important distinction to make. We don't need any more data. Now, fear for terrorist attacks, fear or the desire to be secure, to feel secure, is often the excuse to push for more data collection and more information about citizens. But reality is that not a single terror attack has been really conducted because we didn't know it. It has been conducted because our system didn't prevent it, which is a very important distinction. Now, let me switch gears here for a moment, and I apologize up front because normally I'm not using that tool in my toolset, but in this case, I have to. I'm from Germany, and I'm really sorry to pull that card, but I have to tell you a story. As you know, Nazis had a very strict idea back in the day, what makes a worthy human. That idea led them to pass a series of laws back then that required doctors to send detailed health reports. Now, what did they do then? If you had a profile not worthy, let's say certain diseases, let's say you've been even depressed, I'm not overstating that. It may happen that the government ordered you to be castrated because your genes were not seen as good for breeding the perfect German citizen. And then they also used that data to find homosexuals. Now, why was the data there in the first place? Because before the Nazis came into power, Germany was a democracy. We had gay clubs. It was not a well-respected, but an accepted way of living to be homosexual. And all of a sudden, the next government, in that case the Nazis, used all that data to really crack down on citizens. And that can happen again. That is why we Germans are very touchy on that subject, and why we insist on anonymity, why even our health data is regulated. And, well, you can say we kind of try to learn our lesson here. So here's the thing. We create our system, and we have patterns that we learn there. And we, you, me, probably most of the people listening to this podcast have nothing to fear because we are white, because we are educated, because we are mainstream. But what if you're on the corner of this system and your government learns through patterns about things the government is not approving of? And then the next government decides to crack down on it. To regulate, to hunt you down. That is the kind of thing that we, as mainstream, that has nothing to hide and nothing to fear to say, we can prevent by being conscious about that effect on our end. It's still, I maintain that position. No, the government has no business in knowing my private data. In fact, we all have to protect our private data to protect those who are vulnerable.
And now on to Sebastian.
I see you could not resist using Godwin's law. People can check that online and bringing the Nazis in the conversation, but that's okay. Let's talk about the first part of your argument, which is in the past, data has not allowed to detect terrorists, but we're not talking about the past, Dirk. We're talking about the future, and the future is now. The reason I say this is cyber warfare, and we talked about this in the previous debate. Electronic wars, digital wars are happening now, and there's already this spying going on by foreign powers, so this is not something of the past. Terrorist attacks are getting more and more elaborate, and the terrorists are actually smart. They're not. They are well educated. The second aspect on the health aspect. So what do you do in that case? My suggestion is let's define what kind of data you collect. We can have aggregates of data. You can make data anonymous. You don't have to say your sexual orientation. of course, you can build a lot of what if the next government, but then it's a trade-off between, indeed, a little risk that the people, the citizens, will not detect that there is a future autocrat, a dictator in formation in their country, as opposed to making progress on the health aspect. And the thing is, even aside from this debate, the data is already there. I believe there have been studies by researchers who have been able to show that we can detect your sexual orientation based on whatever you've said on Facebook publicly, or the traces you've left on the internet. So actually all that kind of data, whether you actually give it away freely or not, is already there. And this is the scary part, is that we as citizens, as internet users, we're not really aware of what we're leaving in terms of traces. We don't even have to leave data as much as metadata. What time of the day have you visited maybe something on the internet? Where did you go and when, without disclosing the actual content of the conversation or the website that you have visited. So the data is there and is already exploited by commercial companies. So again, it's a trade-off between commercial companies, progress on science and health, safety of citizens, and indeed the risk. There is a risk, always a risk. I'm not going to deny it. Now, there is one more point I'd like to raise here, and I can give an example after that. I think the real problems are as follows. How long do you keep the data for? If we keep the data for 6 months, if the government keeps it for 6 months, then maybe that's not a big deal. If the government is transparent about it, maybe it's less of a deal. If there's no blanket approval, if the justice system is very clear that this can be only used for specific use cases, health or prevention of terrorist attacks, and I'll give an example for this, and what kind of data can be collected, then I think we can feel a bit more reassured with that. Let me give the example from Super Freakonomics, the book. They realized that a terrorist would be unlikely to buy life insurance, have a savings account, and withdraw money from an ATM on a Friday afternoon. I wonder why. Now, what's funny is that when they mentioned this in the book, the would-be terrorists then suddenly open a life insurance. But the thing is, they've opened this in the same bank where they had their current account, which is something very unusual. Most people would not have a life insurance in the same bank. So actually, even mentioning this was allowed the government and the police to crack down on would-be terrorists. So yes, there's a lot of value, and it is being currently used to track down terrorists and hopefully have also beneficial uses like health.
Final statements. Dirk goes first.
2 things. First, I agree on one thing you said, that probably we need to learn a better definition about what's private data. People are too open with that. And yes, it's not making it any better that every commercial company seem to have access to our profiles. That's not really justifying access to private data. It's basically making my point. The second piece of it, I just reiterate, no, we don't have a lack of data. We have enough data as it is. And by accessing private data, you surveil people. You surveil millions of people because a few hundred may act as a terrorist or as a criminal for that matter. And that changes behavior of people. And that exactly is what kills freedom. That basically means you're removing freedom because people moderate themselves because they know they're being watched. That's why I keep being against the motion and against governments being allowed to collect private data.
Sebastian.
I recognize I am in the most difficult position today for that debate. And maybe we have enough data. I don't know. The point is whether it is worthwhile for the government to collect data. And let's not forget that the state, the government, is us. We decide who's in power. We indirectly make the laws. So we can define what kind of checks and balances we want to have. Let's not say it's them, the government, as if it were some kind of external entity. It is us. We can define what we want to do for our societies. And indeed, in some cases, in some countries, there's no democracy. In this case, the use of the data will be against citizens instead of for the safety or the health of the citizens. And indeed, I want to emphasize that as opposed to commercial companies, which are using this data for their private benefits, which is also maybe in the interest of the users, but you can't guarantee that. At least the government have a way to be directly taken responsible, accountable for what they do with the data. You can vote at the next elections if you're not happy with them, or you can run up for elections. So yes, I'm in favor of governments being able to collect some of the data, some of the private data. All right, we're done. Thank you very much for listening to our debate. Please let us know what you thought of this debate in the comment section of the website or on social media, what arguments we could have used to make a stronger case. And that's it for now. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, actually, I've convinced myself.
You convinced yourself. Have you seen that discussion that's going on right now? The debate asking you for your social media account data when you want to cross the border?
Isn't that a joke?
No, it's not a joke.
Isn't that optional?
That's
It's not optional?
No, they literally discuss if border police should force you to hand over your social media passwords. They basically take your phone, walk away with your password, and then they take a full dump of the stuff that you have on your phone.
Nice.
And that is actually where it breaks. You know, it's such a nice concept of having government allowing to look into your data, but you would never hand over your phone with your password and tell them, oh yeah, scroll through my stuff. You know what? There are interesting pictures. Maybe you want to look at them too.
But if I'm not mistaken, the fact that you have your phone on some of the airlines, like Air France, which I've been taking quite a bit, or I don't know if Lufthansa was affected too, but Air France definitely. Apparently, all the phones were being spied upon. And all the cabin discussions or whatever for the past few years, the flights.
I wouldn't be surprised by that, because the easiest way to get those passwords is having a camera placed in a plane, right? You can watch all the people typing in the passwords on their laptops.
I don't know if they put it in a camera. I think it was just they targeted in-flight mobile use. American and British spy agencies.
I'm not surprised at all. If I wouldn't be surprised. You know, you're sitting in a plane. You open your laptop, connect to the Wi-Fi. Why wouldn't they tap into that Wi-Fi connection? Tell me.
The reason it's for your safety.
Yeah. I feel so much safer now. Just read that today on Medium. That was someone from NASA. They asked him to unlock the phone. And first he resisted, but as you know, you don't have any rights. Even an American citizen has a very limited subset of rights while he's in that border patrol setting. They are not allowed to torture you and to physically harm you, but apart from that, they are allowed to keep you there. They can make you stand up, whatever. So they took away his phone, walked away 30 minutes, and then came back, gave it to him, and then he could leave. And that made him write a piece on Medium where he said, this is why you shouldn't carry your phone with you when you're traveling internationally. And he's right, because you know what? Our phones are connected to the cloud. If I unlock my phone, you get everything from that phone, including, by the way, all my other passwords. If I unlock my phone and hand it over to you and you have 30 minutes time, you get access to my life. And I'm not sure if I'm willing to give that away. And as I said, I think it's a question of civil liberty. It's a question of freedom. It's a question of being able to resist the next government. I'm not feeling very, very well by the thought that right now Trump has access to the world's most powerful surveillance machinery.
To be frank, I think this is a concern. Yes, I completely agree with you, but I'm going to be pessimistic here. Number one is I think it's a lost battle. We should try resist it, I agree, but it's a lost battle. And I think the second point is I think the real threat is not our governments as much as other governments. This is what I'm mostly concerned about. And I think it's even worse on that second aspect. I think this is a completely lost battle because they're different countries. There's no single regulation, no single jurisdiction. If someone like Putin can invade Crimea and say, it's my country now, and nothing happens, I mean, what about data? Who gives a damn about your data? Come on. If you can just invade a country, come with your military and pretend that it's not even you. I'm sorry to be pessimistic, but we have to resist our governments, yes. I think it's just a small battle in comparison to the huge storm that is happening and that is invisible.
That's totally That's the next upcoming wars. Yeah, I'm right. I agree. And I'm right.